So first one on my list, at least, is David Esquivel. He is a pro bono member and partner at Bassberry and Sims. So I get the great pleasure of working with David every once in a while. We also have Ms. Maria Salas, who's the clerk and master of the Davidson County Chancery Court. I think we're still waiting on Renette Adams-Taylor, but she is the Associate General Counsel and Director of Compliance and Risk at Meharry Medical College here in town. Amy, should we go ahead and start with the questions? Okay, great. So first, we're just going to ask each panelist to provide a brief overview of their professional journey and current profession.
David, you want to go first?
I'd be happy to go first. Let me first say that my colleague Ashleigh Karnell could sit on this panel and talk about her professional life. She's a very accomplished lawyer, and so I will put in my vouching for Ashleigh, having worked with her many times. My professional career in the legal industry got off to a pretty slow start. It began the summer after my senior year of high school, and I worked as I don't know exactly what you call it, in a law firm in Dallas, Texas, right before I started college. My main job was to walk around the firm and count light bulbs that had burned out and alert building management. But one day I was asked to perform a more serious task, which was to videotape a senior member of the firm who was talking to summer associates about how to take a deposition. And this was a very highly esteemed member of the bar of Dallas, Texas. And my job was to set up an actual video recorder with a VHS tape and preserve this person's wisdom for posterity. And about 5 minutes into this thing where my job was to preserve his eloquence, somehow the camera stopped working. And being 17 years old and in a room full of lawyers, I didn't have the wisdom to alert anyone to this fact. So I kind of pretended like it was still going, and later had to confess to my boss that I had screwed the whole thing up. And so that was a pretty rough start to law firms, and I had to turn that around. But I guess moving forward, I went to college and law school at Duke. I was a law clerk to a federal circuit court judge in North Carolina the year after law school, and then spent a couple of years as an associate at a law firm in Washington, D.C. It was called at the time Shane Gardner. It's since become the an office of Goodwin Proctor, which is a Boston-based firm, as some of you may know. And I thought after 2 years in D.C., though I liked living in D.C. very much, that I didn't want to be a lawyer anymore. What I am glad that I discovered is that I didn't want to be a lawyer at firm or maybe at a law firm in Washington, D.C., but moved to Nashville in 2001 and became an associate at Bassberry and Sims, and I've been here for 20 years now. I have done a variety of things at the firm. I've been a litigator throughout my career. I have done at various times focused on antitrust law for a period of time. I was a regulatory monitor for the Securities and Exchange Commission in an engagement that the firm has. I have most recently become a consumer finance lawyer. But the thing that I've done throughout my career is try to do as much pro bono legal work as possible. And I've done it enough that I convinced the firm a couple of years ago to designate a new position among the partners. And as Ashleigh said, I'm now the pro bono partner at the firm. And what that means is that half of my time at the firm is spent doing paying client work, and half of my time is spent doing pro bono work and helping manage the firm's overall pro bono program. So as of 2 years ago, I have landed my dream job, and I've never been happier in my career, and have great mix of interesting Fair Credit Reporting Act cases, if you can find that interesting, which I do, and some really interesting cases and matters that are pro bono that are in a variety of areas, some litigated, some not litigated, but all very meaningful work. So I feel like I'm coming to you at a point where I'm really high on the legal profession, high on being a lawyer, and hopefully can have a discussion and be helpful and have good conversation about developing a lawyer and setting professional goals and figuring out how to achieve them. Oh, I guess I'm supposed to also talk about philanthropy and nonprofit. Is that Ashleigh? Is that this, or is that a later question?
You can go ahead and speak about it now if you want to, David.
Well, I guess it's part of the pro bono. I mean, it's not particular about defining pro bono as legal work, but akin to pro bono is involvement in the community. And I've had the real pleasure of working with a number of different nonprofits in Nashville, and has been done some very rewarding work and met a lot of great people. And the Nashville Public Library Foundation is at the top of that list in terms of the work that I've done and the difference that I've seen nonprofits make in the community. I've served on June 30th, they're going to kick me off the foundation board because you can only serve 6 years. But if you serve as chair of the board, for some reason, you get a bonus year. So I got this 7th year on the foundation board, but that all comes to end in another 22 days. And so I've really enjoyed serving with the Library Foundation. I've enjoyed especially seeing the Next Chapter Society grow to what it has become, and see the foundation and different sort of all the different ways that the foundation is reaching out into the community, drawing people in. So that has been very meaningful. I've also served on the Conexión Américas board. If you're familiar, this is the Hispanic Latinx advocacy and services group that has also done a tremendous amount of work in Nashville. I'm also currently serving on a different end of the spectrum, which is interesting, on the board of a foundation that gives money. I guess the Public Library Foundation does that, but it's also fundraising. But there's an organization called the Maddox Fund, which is has about a $50 million corpus of assets, and its whole function is to make grants to community groups. And Maddox Fund is actually a funder of the Public Library Foundation. So that has been an interesting part of community service and nonprofit, is having been involved in a lot of nonprofits that raise money, like the Public Library Foundation. It's been a really interesting experience to be on the board of an organization that figures out how to grant money. And so that's a snapshot of some of the nonprofit community work that I've done.
Thank you, David. And someone who has gotten to personally work on some of those oh, sorry, there's some echo. Fair Credit Reporting Act cases, I can tell you they are in fact entertaining, especially with David. Maria, you want to take the question, same question?
Oh, sure. I started my professional career and now I'm at the tail end of it, not actually practicing law. My first job out of college, I worked in higher education, and I was in higher education probably for about 4 years in admissions, traveling around to high schools across the state of Tennessee, recruiting students, first for a small university in Lebanon, Cumberland University, and then for Austin Peay State University in Clarksville. And somewhere along the line decided I did not want to spend any more time in high school gymnasiums or guidance counselor offices, and thought, well, I had one law class in undergraduate, maybe I'll try law school. So I went back to the National School of Law and spent 4 years there getting my law degree at night. And during the time I worked a couple of years for the state in the Division of Consumer Affairs. And then my last 2 years at the National School of Law, I clerked for what was a really small firm in town then. It's not big by Bass-Berry size, but it's now Lewis Thomason, where their main office was in Knoxville, and had a really small office in Nashville at the time, about like 7 or 8 lawyers, doing mostly products liability work. So I spent most of my first year as an associate carrying around a clipboard in rural parts of Mississippi for accident reconstruction on 3- and 4-wheeler cases, because that's a lot of what Lewis Thomason did, was products liability work, and Honda was a big client at the time. And then I left the firm and went across the street and started working for a solo practitioner doing consumer bankruptcy work, and found my niche and practiced consumer bankruptcy representing debtors for 20 years, and just absolutely loved it. You really got to help people. You got to have a real area of expertise, one area of the law. I never had to answer my family questions about divorces or criminal law. It's like, I don't know anything about anything except bankruptcy law. Oh, we don't need to file bankruptcy. And did that for a really long time. And then when I saw the posting about the clerk of master position in Chancery Court, there's something about it that just hit me. And it was about the time that, trying to think now, see, I've been in that position now. I'm almost to the end of my first term. It's a 6-year term. So I'm 5.5 years in, and my daughter is 15. So she was like 3rd grade, maybe, 4th, I don't know. I just decided that government work was more conducive to being a single parent of what was going to be a teenager soon enough, and left private practice and have not looked back. And it's so interesting. I've gone from being an expert in one area to not knowing anything about a lot of different areas. You're just so specialized in bankruptcy. In Chancery Court, there are so many things that come up. It's so interesting. It's just a broad practice. I have a staff of about 15 deputy clerks. I went from being my own boss to having 4 bosses. That's probably the biggest change about leaving private practice and going to work for the government. But I love it. It's really, really interesting and fun. And I still get to see the same lawyers that I enjoyed, practicing with and seeing at bar events. I just don't have to go head to head against them in any kind of litigation. You can just walk upstairs and just, chat for a while. So that's pretty much it, I guess, about the trajectory of my professional career. As far as philanthropy, most of my early, I guess, nonprofit work centered around LGBT rights. As a gay person, that was something that obviously was very important to me. That would have probably been when I started doing that work about 20 years ago. So it was very different. Now I was starting to think about the groups that I was involved in. And one of the groups was called the Nashville Association for Professional Persons. That organization is now the Nashville LGBT Chamber. But back then, we didn't dare call ourselves, it was a chamber of commerce for LGBT business owners, but we didn't call ourselves that for fear that nobody would have a job the next day, or that nobody would, venture into your business the next day. So that organization has really come a long way and is doing a lot of really good work here in town. I think my nonprofit work evolved from some of those LGBT issues. I served on the National Cares Board, helped start a group called Tennessee Equality Project, which does some political advocacy work now. And that group has really expanded. It's now a statewide group. It was just based in Nashville at one point in time. But after I adopted my daughter, some of my nonprofit work really geared more towards kid stuff. So I did a stint on the Nashville Children's Theater Board, and then have really been an advocate, I think, for her educational stuff. And that's what I think led me to the Public Library Foundation Board. We started out going to library events when she was really little, and still continue to check out her books at the library or through the school library now all the time. That's kind of an overview. And we're gonna have to talk longer now because I see that Renette's not gonna be available.
Well, I'm not going to talk any longer. I'm looking at all the people on the screen to hear people talk.
Amy, do we want to go ahead and open it up for questions? If people want to, oh, there we go. Put their questions in the chat, and then we would be happy to start answering them.
I'm not going to be shy to ask a question. I know that I am not in the legal profession, but I am just curious about how there was, or where was there crossover between the personal and the professional, so philanthropic and then professional. How did that weave together? And especially in regards to the amount of time required, as you both have been very active with philanthropy. So just curious about how you wove in enough time to do all of that stuff while you were on your professional trajectory.
I'll go first on that one, David. I think for me, one of the big differences of having the time is that I adopted my daughter later in life. So a lot of, I think, professional women, I adopted my kid when I was 42. So I really had developed my career and had more time to devote to other things before I became a parent. Because I certainly think that takes a lot of time away, whether you're male or female, from professional careers. I didn't really there wasn't a lot of actual legal crossover work with the type of practice that I had and the nonprofit work that I was involved in, with one exception. Early in my career, the Nashville Bar Association started an organization. It was a function of the Young Lawyers Division of the Nashville Bar, and this was early in the AIDS crisis. It was in the early 80s, and they had a nonprofit group, an initiative where lawyers would do pro bono wills for people with HIV and AIDS. And so that was probably one of the only really crossover areas where I was doing legal work that kind of meshed with some of the nonprofit work that I was really interested in. Because after that, again, most of my expertise was really focused on bankruptcy. And so I wasn't very helpful as a board member for any kind of legal analysis. Like sometimes I know lawyers will go on boards and they're like, well, you really have an expertise in contracts or have an expertise in this, and that's going to be really helpful to us in your board service. And that never was something that I was really helpful to anybody on a board, because my legal expertise was so limited and focused.
Well, in terms of, balancing career and time to involved in the nonprofit community and family. Certainly family is huge. Like Maria said, I had 3 kids. The oldest is 19, the youngest is 14. And so when they were young, that left a lot less time for a lot of things. But I think that the key in serving on boards and being involved in the community is you have to be involved with something that you're passionate about, and otherwise you're not going to have the energy to do it. And so I have one commitment that I made in particular, where it was clear after about a year or two that the organization that I was had asked to serve on an advisory committee of was not I wasn't as into it as I thought. The group didn't do as much as I thought it was going to do, and so it just stopped. So I mean, that is some advice: is if you're not committed to something, time is too precious, and better for you and the organization to say, this is not something that, it's not the same interest, and that will happen naturally anyway. But just, I think it was easier for me to do things, and I found myself wanting to give time to organizations that I really believed in and I thought were doing important work in the community. And that's what enables that. Organizations I've been involved with have had draws for me personally. Working with Conexión Américas is natural. My parents are both refugees from Cuba. My sister and I are first generation born in the United States. And so coming to Nashville and seeing an organization that's serving recent Hispanic immigrants is a natural draw for me. I remember going to one of their early breakfasts before I knew anything about it. And there was a band playing Latin music in the Lowe's Vanderbilt Hotel. And I remember thinking, I've never seen anything like this in Nashville. I didn't know this existed in Nashville. Just the music and the people. And so anyway, that's how I got involved in Conexión, is that there was fantastic music playing at a breakfast fundraiser. But in terms of legal, I also, one place where it has overlapped is working with the Tennessee Justice Center, both serving on their board and with our law firms having a lot of pro bono work together with Tennessee Justice Center. The work that they do as lawyers, I've always held in very high regard, and they have brought a lot of impact litigation that has affected the availability of health care for people all across the state. And so that was one where being a lawyer and being involved with Tennessee Justice Center really overlapped, because as a lawyer, I enjoyed helping them and learning about the organization, what they're doing, and doing pro bono work with them in a way that was particularly rewarding as a lawyer.
So I have a question. I'm not in the legal profession at all, but kind of between your legal career and just your own personal skill sets, are there any skills that have been really helpful in helping you in your careers and your philanthropic leadership positions that you think are kind of just important for young professionals to work on?
I don't know about skills. I think personality traits. I'm such an extrovert, and I really get energy from people and being out. And as I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking about the nonprofit work, I think how hard it might be, or what a challenge it might be if you're more introverted and you don't necessarily get that kind of energy from people. There's certainly ways to do that, but I always enjoyed that. I just enjoy people, and I really like lawyers. I know a lot of lawyers that don't really like lawyers, but I really like lawyers. And in addition to, I guess I'm not necessarily a nonprofit per se that we would think about it, but bar association work and involvement has been a really big part of where I've devoted some time. I've served a couple of stints on the National Bar Association board, and really have enjoyed working with that. And I'm currently on the Bar Foundation now. And so just not only to network, to build your practice and meet other lawyers, but I just really have enjoyed the camaraderie and just the connection with other legal professionals.
I think curiosity is a really valuable tool to cultivate when you are, whether you're a lawyer or whatever your work is. But if you are working with a nonprofit, you're interested in helping and being part of that work, asking questions is a great way to reveal for an organization what's going well, what's not going well, what needs to change. So if I becoming part of an organization, I like to ask as many questions as I can, be curious, learn about an organization, and then I think ways that you can be helpful then start to reveal themselves. The second thing I'd say is pretty basic, which is, just be willing to do the work. I sort of have in mind this hypothetical like board meeting that always happens at a nonprofit where you get to the point of the meeting where people have to do something like, we need you to write 5 people. We need you to call 10 people. We need you to do this thing. And then is that awkwardness where staff of the nonprofit say, okay, this is the point where the people are going to do something. And then people on the staff keep talking because no one's saying anything. It's very awkward. I hate that point in the meeting. But I mean, the point is a lot of people like to go to meetings and then like be seen at a nonprofit board meeting, but they don't have much interest in actually doing a lot of work. So I think you can very quickly distinguish yourself by volunteering to do things. It's very simple, but I think to the extent I've had leadership positions, I don't know. I mean, Shawn and Amy can, correct me if I'm wrong. To the extent I've asked to be the leader in different organizations is just because I volunteered to do stuff. Library Foundation is an example. I was the lawyer on this board. The Library Foundation board has, a lot of very fancy people on it. And I wasn't in that crowd, but I was a lawyer and they needed help with the bylaws. And so I became the person who really understood the Nashville Public Library Foundation bylaws. And the chair of the committee at the time in meetings would ask me about bylaws questions. And because I learned the bylaws and I worked on revisions to the bylaws, and not a lot of people really wanted to put in time between meetings going through the bylaws, but it was, it was helpful to the organization. And I think, so pick the thing that you like to do and then work at it.
I have a question for both of our panelists. Oh, sorry, there's an echo. How do you think that your board or volunteer work has helped your career as a lawyer?
You want to go first, David, or do you want me to go?
Well, yeah, I will. I mean, my off the cuff answer is a little smart ass, so I'm not sure I should say it. But how has putting a lot of time in a nonprofit community advanced my legal career at the law firm? Yeah, it's been satisfying to me. This is probably not the answer you want to hear. I put this in the category of it has been good for my career because it's been good for my own health and the way I am in the world. I think if I did not do committee work, if I had not done pro bono work, I would not have lasted a long time in a law firm, because I don't think I would have felt like doing 100% credit reporting cases. I could have sustained that career for very long. So I don't know that serving on the library board or the Conexión board or doing nonprofit work made Bassberry and Sims. They didn't pay me anymore for that. I didn't get any paying client. I'll be honest. I think some people join board because they think if you're a lawyer in a firm or you're, you're going to get some paying client work out of the connections you make. That might work for some, but that wasn't my experience. And sort of informal polling with people, I don't know. Unless that board service also overlaps with other relationships you have, I can't think of a time when someone that I served on a board with called me and said, we really want to hire you to do this paying work. So anyway, that's kind of depressing, or that's just the reality that I've had. But I view it more as this work has been, the community work has been essential for me to like sustain my legal career. Otherwise, I would have burned out too fast.
I think because the type of work I did, that, I represented individuals. And so, consumer bankruptcy lawyers don't necessarily make a ton of money anyhow. You think, well, how do you get paid? Your people don't have any money. But some of my connections, and just would be, whether it was connection working with a neighborhood association board, or connection particularly with bar association organizations, or, I had somebody that I was on the CARES board, that might refer me somebody. I have gotten clients that way. But I think that's more because of the nature of the type of practice that I had, because I agree with David. I think that it's not necessarily that you're going to enhance your practice by your nonprofit work. And in fact, you probably, you're going to have to add on to your commitments, and certainly not take away from your professional work, but you're going to have to add on or take away from something, maybe some of your private time or your family time, but you're going to add on this nonprofit work. But in my case, the connections, I can count lots of clients over the years that were referrals from somebody that I would have met or interacted with on a board, or particularly when I was involved with the Bar Association early in my career. A lot of those Bar Association lawyers had the same type of practice I did. We were all young lawyers doing insurance defense work. Well, when I left that insurance defense practice and started doing consumer bankruptcy work, then all of a sudden the lawyers that were my buddies, people that we were on the Bar Association boards and hanging out together, they're like, oh, well, she's not competing against me anymore. We're not trying to fight for the same clients. And in fact, my client's cousin's sister needs a bankruptcy. And so I'm going to send that over to Maria Salas. So I really built my practice in consumer bankruptcy on referrals from people that either I worked with or associated with in bar association activities. And then as the practice grew, just connections in the nonprofit world and the community.
I think it, like different settings are going to be applied differently depending on your practice. I'd be really curious, like, for example, in the Attorney General's office, I don't know whether like being involved in the community is helpful. I mean, I'd be very curious to know if you think if you think it's the case. I mean, I'm just thinking about all the variety of practices and places where lawyers operate.
And I mean, now, like, there are limitations with my board service because of my government position, that I make it clear when I'm going to be involved in like when I was on the Children's Theater Board, and that time of year when the Children's Theater and all the other art organizations are going up to the Metro Council, asking for money for funding. Well, I can't really be involved in any of that work because I'm over here in my professional job, also going for the Metro Council to present my department's budget. So I have to be very careful about those kinds of things in my current position and my board service.
Not to go against what David was saying, but from a junior attorney perspective, I do think that I've gained a lot of good experience through pro bono and nonprofit work. Sometimes when you're fresh in a first year, second year in a firm, you don't get a lot of people time, or, you might just be doing a lot of research or, document review. So I think, especially the pro bono matters that I've gotten to be a part of, I've gotten to take a bigger role on and meet more people with, do client interviews and that sort of thing. So if there are any law students or junior attorneys out there like me, I do think getting involved with any of the nonprofit work has been really helpful, just developing my skill set, even just my people skills more than anything. So it might not bring you business, but it might help you get better in the first run at least. And Maria, you spoke a little bit about the Bar Association. I was just wondering if you have any recommendations, either of you have recommendations on professional organizations or other nonprofit pro bono organizations that you've worked with that you think would be good for perhaps some of, if we have any law students out there or, more junior attorneys.
Well, I think the Young Lawyers Division of the Nashville Bar, not only does it, you get to meet people initially, and you kind of can bond of all of the, crap work that your seniors lawyers are giving you, but it really is, I think, considered more the philanthropic arm of the National Bar Association. I have lifelong friends that I met in the Young Lawyers Division. And then also I was involved really early on in my legal career with the Lawyers Association for Women organization. And, that is for women, guys, not of women. There are lots of men that are members and supportive, and that organization has really grown as well. And I think both of those are excellent. And you have opportunities. Of course, the Young Lawyers Division, it's mostly young lawyers, young not only in age, but by profession years, because I certainly wasn't really young when I graduated law school. But with the Lawyers Association for Women, there are a lot of opportunities for leadership positions, board positions, for really young lawyers.
I have a question. What do you see as your most important job as a board member for the foundation? And then also, how did you identify mentors as you progressed through your career so far?
David, you've been on the board a lot longer. Do you want to take that first one?
Yeah, well, I'll take the first one. It's a good question. I'm trying to think of what might distinguish the library foundation. Some of the general things of being a board member, it's really important to help think about the strategic direction of the organization. And the library foundation, over the last 7 years, I can think of a lot of places where there are important decisions to be made about, what kind of fundraising community impact do we want to have, and making that strategic decision resulted in different initiatives and changes. Like there was a separate organization called Friends of Library, which was organizations that supported at the branch level. And, it took a couple of years to work through a merger of that organization, the foundation, and combine its work. But, so that's sort of an important strategic consideration. The Next Chapter Society, the foundation board decided to make this a strategic priority to get young professionals. The Library Foundation Board demographic, the Library Foundation itself, the supporting demographic skewed older and skewed, not necessarily to people who are newcomers to Nashville and people who are young people. And it was a strategic decision to say we want to put priority and emphasis on having a much broader reach into the community. So, I think that's among the most important thing the board does. The board exists to set that kind of strategic advantage strategic priorities, to monitor the funding and having a plan and funding and having a long-term vision for what the foundation is going to do and how it's going to get its assets, how it's going to maintain its assets. But in my mind, thinking long-term about what this organization needs to do in order to look like and do what it wants to do, not next year, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 25 years from now, is probably the most important thing that the board does.
Early years ago, I served a couple of terms on the national board of the Human Rights Campaign, which is the largest LGBT advocacy organization in the country. And they used to say that you got on the board for one of three things: wealth, work, or wisdom. And I knew that I was not the wealth part. And I've kind of taken that and all the boards where I've served and think, okay, I'm here because somebody thinks that I've got some strategic ideas or wisdom, but mostly I figured, I'm on these boards to work. And most of that work to me is being out in the community, being an advocate and a cheerleader for the organization, showing up to the board meetings if somebody gives you a task to do it. But I've also kind of evolved a little bit about what the wealth portion means. Not only does it mean you need to have some skin in the game, and that is dependent on your personal financial situation that's between you and the organization, but there's some value to your name. I don't know about you guys, but when I get an invitation and somebody's asking me to contribute, I look and see who's involved in those organizations. And so maybe the wealth piece is the wealth of your reputation and the wealth of your name and what you've done in the community. And somebody will say, okay, you know what? I may not have a lot of money to give, but I know that X, who's somebody that I value and recognize as a leader in the community that has done some stuff for organizations I've been involved in. If they're involved in that organization, then that organization must be worth something to me as well. And so I think that maybe is not exactly an answer to your question, but it tells me kind of what I think my role is, and then how I look at when other people ask me about contributing to their nonprofit organizations. As far as mentors, I think I've just identified people in my career. I'm still close to my first boss, the guy who gave me my first job out of college. I talked to him a couple of weeks ago, and it was just some kind of connection. And I don't know that you can necessarily define that as, this person had this, that, but we clicked somehow. And, he gave me the best professional advice I've ever received. And it goes to everything. It's do what you say you're going to do. And that's good professional and personal advice. I think it's kind of like what David was talking about earlier. If you show up and you do the work. And I've just, for mentors, I've looked for people that I think are doing big things and doing honorable things, and just tried to tag along on their coattails.
Yeah, I echo that. A mentor is somebody who you want your practice or your nonprofit work, your life look like what their life looks like. And so find somebody who's doing something that you would like to do, and then apprentice yourself to them. I think that, and when I think back about mentors, there's also an important part of a mentor relationship is there's some affinity you have in common. There's something you share that makes that you invest in a relationship and your mentor invest in a relationship. It could be a variety of things. I mean, there's lots of affinities people have with each other. But when you find somebody that you want to learn from, and then you find something that you share in common that's really intrinsic to who you are, and I think that's the recipe for like the kind of mentorship that you have. And some of these things are not so obvious. Like I think it can cross lines of gender and race and other things. The people who have there are people who have commonalities that are not always apparent, and I think be on the lookout for things you have in common with someone where in traditional sort of categories you might say, I'm not sure what all I have in common with them, but you might be surprised.
All right, we're getting close to the end of the program, so I am going to close this out with one final question. What is one thing that you would tell your younger former self?
I would like to take that first, Maria.
Go right ahead.
Because I'm so young. I mean, I just gotta look back a couple of years and just, I don't know, like a couple of years ago, what I would say. But I'm 50. I don't know. That seems, I don't know where that ranks on the young scale. I think that what I would say, one thing, one thing is that this is not a one-size-fits-all advice, so I don't think this falls. This is particular to like my own personal younger self. This might be bad advice for somebody else. I think when I was younger, I suffered from a lot of imposter syndrome, and I thought, I don't belong in the meetings where I am. I don't belong in some of the places I am. And I really, and I can identify specific places and times where I think it held me back. So if I were counseling my like 18 to 25-year-old self, I would probably say, you know, be a little more self-confident that you are, you know, you belong where you are and your contributions are valuable. If you're a person who's way overconfident, that's a terrible bit of advice. Don't do that if you're really overconfident, because then you're just going to look like a horrible person. So, but if you have the imposter syndrome, that's my advice, and that's what I tell a younger me of like 30 years ago.
Gosh, I think that one of the things, there's probably lots of things, and I've had lots of therapy, so I could go on and on about all the different things. But one of the things I would tell my younger self is it's okay to admit that maybe you can't have it all right now. Doesn't mean you can't have it all, but like I can't imagine having, I know some people do it and just praise them, people that have, you know, kids when they're trying to ramp up their career, or have, you know, more than one kid when they're trying to ramp up the career. I can't imagine my younger self having done what I was doing or trying to do in my career, and, you know, trying to be the gay advocate at the time with having a young child. And that was okay to not think you could have that all at the time. And, you know, now I've shifted gears, and, you know, I kind of feel like if I did the career thing, not that I don't, you know, appreciate my career now, it's just it's a different ebb and flow than I had when I was hustling all the time. And so to say to yourself, you know, I'm just doing the best I can do right now.
Thank you.
Let me just second the suggestion to see a therapist earlier. That I think I would go to my younger self and say, it's probably helpful for you to talk through with somebody who's a professional in these things.
I want to thank both of our panelists for their great advice and for sharing their time and their expertise with us. And I am going to turn it over to Shawn.
Thank you. I just asked if I could have a minute. I wasn't planning to talk, but just really grateful as I sat through the conversation. David, Maria, just grateful for you. And, you know, Maria, you talked about the wisdom. I feel like even tonight, both of you so generously shared your wisdom, and am just grateful. And for our Next Chapter Society members, I could not be prouder of the work that you all are doing and your engagement, even with our board. So part of, you know, when Amy was talking about doing this, part of the, you know, purpose was really just the opportunity to learn from about the particular careers. But I think as well, and even as sitting through this, what I recognize is for you all to have an opportunity to engage with the foundation and the board members in this kind of way, because of the wisdom that I just mentioned and that they've shared. In my experience with nonprofit boards, and of course I'm a little bit biased, but I would say we have the best board that I've ever worked with in other organizations. And so just for you to be able to have a glimpse of that. And then I also, you know, one of the questions was, what does a how can serving on a board benefit you as a lawyer? And I just wanted to flip that for one moment and just say, for us as a foundation, it has been so helpful to have. And most nonprofits say you need to have at least attorney on your board. And we have really, like, that has been so true. It's not just been a check the box for us. David talked about becoming the bylaws expert, or helping us as we were trying to merge with the Friends and the foundation and figure out what that means. But I think just also the skills that you have as an attorney, your ability to ask questions, your ability to present kind of perspective and arguments and all of those. I just think through, particularly David, I've worked with you longer, and just through all of the comments you made when you led the board, and knowing then that David was going to have to eventually roll off after 7 years. We kept him as long as we could. But I think even we recognize the importance of having attorneys on the board. And so we brought both Maria and Renette on kind of in anticipation of David rolling off, and knowing how much David as an attorney brought to the board. So for those of you who are seeking or who are in law, the benefit for us as a nonprofit organization to have those skills and the wisdom has just been wonderful. So I just wanted to say thank you to both Maria and David, and then just to all of you who joined in the conversation. This is such important work, and as a nonprofit, we benefit from it in so many different ways. So thank you.
Shawn, can I ask a question? Some of the folks have identified themselves and kind of where they are from. I would like to kind of meet the others, since I'm newer to the board and haven't met some of the folks. If we've got enough time, just.
Amy, I think we have enough time, right? Okay. Well, Ashleigh already introduced me, but I'm Kara Johnson at the Tennessee Attorney General's office. I practice criminal law. And then I'll hand it off to Molly, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, yes. I was emailing with y'all to organize this, so you probably recognize my name. I'm a member of Next Chapter Society, and I am not in law. I work at Gilda's Club.
Hi, I'm Rosemary. I'm one of our Next Chapter Society co-chairs, and I work in the curatorial department at the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum. So not law, but I often deal with a lot of contracts.
I'm John Williams, and Maria, your background sounds familiar to mine. I started in college admissions and then went to Nashville School of Law. And now I work for the legislature, the Office of Legal Services. So we do the bill drafting for the legislature.
Okay.
Hey, my name is Ben Owen. I'm entering my 3L year at Nashville School of Law in healthcare right now. And I saw this event on my school website and thought it would be good to listen and meet some people. So thank you very much. It was very informative.
I'm Trip Conrad. I'm an associate at Waller Lansden doing employment law, and I'm a member of the Next Chapter Society.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, I think it was